you want it, the fresh bark, of course, not these dry, ugly parts. Just remove them. Well, it's the inner bark that you would want because it's supposed to be more nutritious and also a little more, it's fresher of course and better looking. On the pine it doesn't matter that much if it's inner or outer bark, but it's more or less the same all the way through. But on other species like elm or birch for instance, then you would have to remove the outer bark, which is not very suitable for grinding or making into a flour, and you want to get to the inner bark and scrape it off. And then you need to dry it first, and then you need to crush it into powder. In this case, I cheated a little, so I use a grinder instead of crushing it with a hammer. So it's quite easy. And as you can see, it's quite easy to make into flour. It's not much really, of course, it's just basic kitchen equipment. Of course you need one of these, you need a bowl, you need some proper flour, wheat flour in this case, some bark flour and some water, and that's basically it. So in this case I just use 50% of bark and 50% of flour and some water. You can choose actually, there are many recipes and you can of course use more flour, more bark or less bark. It depends on your preferences and of course what resources you have available in the past. So just mix it. Use a little water. Then you start making it into a proper dough. It doesn't look that good yet. So now we have a proper dough. Come closer. Have a look. So this is 50% bark and 50% wheat flour.
So the idea was to supplement the wheat flour with the bark to make it last longer.
Exactly. And you couldn't make it just from bark because then nothing would bind the bread together. So you need some proper flour as well. Like you would make any other bread really, just that the ingredients are different, or at least one of them. It doesn't look that bad on the outside either, but when you open it and I will look on the inside, you can see how much bark there really is in this bread. We want to make it thinner, of course, because if it's thick, it tastes more of pine. So we really want it to be as thin as possible. It tastes better then. If you come closer, you can see all the small pieces of bark in the bread. can actually make bark bread in any way that you want. I make it as flat. I make it like flat bread, so it gets kind of hard and thin. But you can also make ordinary bread if you want. Depends on your preferences.
So during the Little Ice Age period, would they have eaten back bread with anything?
Yeah, I believe so. You use it like you use any other kind of bread product, really. So it's just a supplement for flour. It's not a proper meal in itself. And I read once that you could use, for instance, butter and salt on the bark bread. It gives a little, of course, better taste than just eating it raw. It's not that bad actually to eat it like it is either, but of course it gets quite boring in the long run, right? So you will want something more on it. And you can use it, as I said, like with any other. You can use it like any other bread.
So would this practice have stopped a couple of hundred years ago, or has bark bread been continued to be made up until recently?
It was actually. It's been used during food shortages all the way up to modern times. And for instance, my grandmother-in-law, she was just a kid at the moment, but she remembers making bark bread during the Second World War. Because at the time there were food shortages in Norway, so they had to supplement the flour with something. So they turned to bark bread once more. But they also have in Sami culture in northern Scandinavia, they still use bark as a supplement in their cooking. That's more for the taste of it and not for the nutrients itself, because it's not very nutritious at all.
And how would people have been aware of the recipe for bark bread? How is that handed down, or how do you find that?
I guess some has been public knowledge. For instance, we learn about it in school that people in Norway used to make bark bread during hard times down in history. So, and of course, it's just a supplement, so you just use it to make the flour last longer. So you just include it or integrate it into all other kinds of cooking that you are undertaking, really. And I guess also experimentation as well. So the way of making bark bread has changed over the centuries. I guess in the 18th century it would be more common to make flat bread like I'm making now. But for instance, during the Second World War, you would make ordinary bread with yeast, but then supplement it with bark.
So historically, how do we know that they were using or making bark bread during the Little Ice Age period?
Well, we find them in all kind of sources, really, historical sources. For instance, in reports written by state officials to the government in Copenhagen during food crisis. Sometimes they even sent pieces of bark bread with the reports to the government to kind of underpin the critical situation that the people in Norway were experiencing. So we actually have some of these samples still preserved in the archives today of bark bread. And you also find descriptions of bark bread in topographical journals, for instance, sometimes supplemented with recipes. And you can see from the recipes that there are different practices throughout the country, but also that they prefer different trees in different parts of the country. For instance, some areas preferred pine, others preferred elm, and some even preferred birch, for instance. So it kind of depends on, I guess, what was mostly available locally.